What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my team selection for Game Week 12. So I'm going to run you through how the team is looking. I've got 3 flag players in my team currently and 2 free transfers to deal with it. Lots of options for replacements as well. And I'll quickly show you how I did in Game Week 11. So let's get into it. So Game Week 11 was only 51 points for me, but it was actually a pretty good green arrow. I went from 450k to 286k. So pretty happy with that. And the reason that 51 points did that for me is because of the majority of the points didn't come from Haaland. That's basically the game at the moment. He's so highly owned and so highly captained that his points don't really matter. If you can get the majority of your points from elsewhere, you'll do pretty well. And that's what happened for me in Game Week 11. So my 2 transfers out of 3 were Gyökeres to Guiu and then Reinders to Saka. Saka went and got a 12-pointer, 1 goal, defensive contributions as well, and some bonus points. So that was pretty nice. Bruno Fernandes has actually been pretty consistent recently. Not any huge scores, but another assist, so a 5-pointer. Paquetá, yellow card, it's what he does. He's now suspended for Game Week 12, but he also got an assist. And then Dewsbury Hall assists and defensive contributions. The guy absolutely smashed it in that game against Fulham. He had something like 10 defensive contributions in the first half, and I thought, I know what's going to happen here. He's going to get 1 in the second half, but he continued to absolutely smash it. So, although I went into the week thinking my midfield wasn't that great, Paquetá against Burnley did okay. Dewsbury Hall, massive differential. And it meant that I was able to roll one of my transfers into Game Week 12, which is always nice. The only midfielder that didn't come through is Semenyo. And he missed a penalty. So on another day, I would have had a full house of returns from my midfield. Mateta blanked, is what it is. Haaland missed a penalty, obviously scored as well. So got 4 points into 8 captaincy. Like I said, it doesn't really matter what Haaland does at the moment because of his ownership. And then in defence, I played Anderson even though Dewsbury Hall was up against him instead of Senesi. That gave me another point. So it just shows with defensive contributions, you don't necessarily have to be so worried about attackers playing defenders. And then Lacroix clean sheet. And I mean, Arsenal double defence, got 1 point each, Raya and Gabriel. But it's almost like the Haaland situation. It doesn't really matter because they're so highly owned. It's almost at the point now where if you've got one Arsenal defender, in fact, it's not almost. I think we're pretty much already at this point. If you've got one Arsenal defender, it's probably better for them to lose the clean sheet because so many people have double and obviously some people have got triple as well. But anyway, international break has been quite long. It's the last one until March, which is quite nice. Although this was a great international break, by the way. Fair play to Ireland and Scotland in particular. Obviously, Ireland get into the playoffs, Scotland through to the World Cup. It was a pretty good international break as they go, but I'm still glad that FPL is back in the Premier League. 51 points, good green arrow. Let's see if we can do it again in Game Week 12. So going into Game Week 12, I'm still currently set up in a back 5 formation. Whether I actually play that by the time we get to Saturday's deadline will depend on what transfers I make, and I'll come on to that in a second, because like most other people, I've got a Gabriel injury to deal with. It's 2 free transfers for me this week and 0.3 million in the bank. Just to cover off the rest of my defence for a second, Raya in goal, going absolutely nowhere. Even if Arsenal do lose Gabriel for like 2 months, I still expect them to be one of the best defences in the league, and the fixtures are still pretty good over the long term. There are some slightly trickier ones coming up, like Chelsea away, Villa away, etc., but it's not really a massive issue. And I'm trying to think of what would it take for me to actually spend a transfer on my goalkeeper? Probably an injury. Otherwise, Raya just stays. Van Dijk already in place. Just keep that in mind when I'm talking about Gabriel replacements for my own team. I already have Van Dijk, so I don't need to consider him. If I didn't have him, he'd probably be the player that I'd bring in. Yes, I think Arsenal defence will still be better without Gabriel than the Liverpool one, but the fixtures are so good. And we're coming up to a period now, December, where there's a lot of game weeks, midweek game weeks as well. Van Dijk's going to play every single game. And it's nice to have that security over this period so you can just concentrate your transfers elsewhere. And if you're picking them up new, he's only 5.9 now. I paid 6 million for him. Hopefully, I'll get that money back soon because I think a lot of people will do Gabriel to Van Dijk. I just think he's a really good pick over the next few weeks. Lacroix, Wolves away, good fixture, good chance of a clean sheet, good chance of defensive contributions. The guy, I think, at this point is surely due a goal. Like, he's hit the bar already. He's had a few chances. He owes me a goal, this guy, because he hasn't had one since I put him in on Wildcard 4. I'm sure it's coming sooner rather than later. Senesi, West Ham at home, good fixture, good for defensive contributions. And then Anderson, Sunderland at home, not a bad fixture on paper. And I think the Fulham defence is probably better than it's shown so far. And he's also really good for defensive contributions. So the rest of the defence looks really good. I'm more than happy to play a back 4 or a back 5 this week. Gabriel, probably has to go. We still haven't had official confirmation, but it looks like he's going to be out for 1 to 2 months. These are the 5 defenders I think I'm most likely to bring in. So Saliba, Timber, so sticking to Arsenal defence, Munoz from Crystal Palace, Truffert from Bournemouth and go double up with Senesi for a few weeks, or Estev. Now, the only reason I would buy Estev is if I want to go for Mbeumo in midfield. I'd have to go for a defender 4.1 million or less, and I'm not going to want to play that defender very much. Leeds and Sunderland don't have good fixtures, so I might as well go for the cheapest nailed option, which would be Estev. And also, there are scenarios where maybe I'd have to play him in game weeks 14 or 16, and that's Palace at home and Fulham at home. Do I expect a clean sheet for Burnley in either of those games? Not really, but at least he has a couple of home fixtures in the weeks where I might need him. So that's the only reason Estev is on the list. There is one other player that should probably be on here, which is a bit harsh to leave out, and that is Richards from Crystal Palace. Because I already have Lacroix, so it would be a double up, but I already have Senesi as well. So Truffert would be a double up on Bournemouth, Richards would be a double up on Palace defence. And Truffert is probably more attacking, but he's not as good for defensive contributions. And it does feel like defensive contribution type of a season in FPL. So maybe I should just go for Richards instead. I think the reason I like Truffert is the home games in 12 and 14. And if I get to 13 and I really don't want a free hit, he's also got Sunderland away. Although, to be fair, I'm not sure that's that much better than Richards against Man United at home, especially when you include defensive contributions. So that will be my 4.5 million defender if I decide to go. Basically, if I want Mbeumo, I've got to go with Stev. If I'm happy to go Cunha, then I can go for Truffert or Richards. So that's the two 4.5s. Or I forget about Man United midfielders and I get someone more expensive, Saliba, Timber, Munoz. I feel like I should go for Timber because when I've done wildcard teams post my own one in wildcard 4, especially when we got to like game week 8, etc., I always said I'd go for a different goalkeeper to Raya and then go for Gabriel and Timber. But now it comes down to actually having to pick Timber. I've got that slight... There's just something telling me to buy Saliba. Just go for the guy that is absolutely nailed on and going to start every single game. Now, we know that Mosquera can come in for Saliba, right, if there's a doubt there. But I don't see that happening now with Gabriel out. Like, do we see Arteta lining up in a Premier League game with Nketiah left centre-back and Mosquera right centre-back? I do not see him doing that when Saliba's fit and available. So for me, Saliba is 100% nailed on for every single game coming up. Can I get there with Timber? I just got this slight doubt. And it's a tiny, tiny, tiny doubt. Like, at most, he's probably going to miss one game in the next 8 or 10. And you could say, well, he's so attacking, it doesn't matter. But now Gabriel's out. Someone else has to be the target from set pieces. And I got Saliba last year when Gabriel was out, and he scored a couple of goals for me. And that shouldn't matter, but I'm human, and it does play on your mind. Well, I did it last season. Maybe it'll happen again. So I think I'm more likely to go for an Arsenal defender than Munoz, because it's quite likely that I will free hit in 13. So Chelsea away doesn't matter. And outside of that, Spurs at home this week, which is fine. Brentford at home in 14. And in game week 16, I know I'm going to want triple Arsenal. And if I get rid of Gabriel and go a different route, I can always come back to a third Arsenal in game week 16, but it's just extra transfers. And I know we can be aggressive, etc., right? Because we've got to use our transfers by 15. We'll get topped up to 5 in game week 16. But I've got a potential Semenyo injury to deal with. I've got a Gabriel one to deal with. You know, there's going to be other moves I want to make down the line. It's all well and good saying we've got so many transfers, but they will get used. This is FPL. Something always happens. Look at your teams right now. How many flags have you got? You know, if you're super aggressive, what if you have the same amount of flags next week? It's less likely, I know, because we won't have another international break. But I just feel like I just get Saliba in or Timber because I know I'm going to want a triple Arsenal late. And I just don't see me wanting a second attacker outside of Saka. Look, I'm not going to go to Yorkresh because that's just going to be too much money unless Haaland gets injured. Eze, I'm just not interested in as a long-term pick. Who else is there, really? So, yeah. I think I'm going to go for an Arsenal defender if I sell Gabriel and if I don't want a Man United midfielder, which I'll come on to in a second. And I'm leaning towards Saliba, but it feels so boring. But then that is kind of just me, right? So, yeah, Munoz in 12 and 14 is probably better than an Arsenal defender. But I think longer term, I think the Arsenal player is better. So right now, it's Timber or Saliba for me as a Gabriel replacement, most likely. I don't know who I'm going to go for. But I think if the deadline was in 5 minutes, I'd probably go Saliba. So as it stands, I'm set up in a midfield 3 this week. So I've got Saka against Spurs at home, currently with the captain's armband. Bruno Fernandes against Everton at home. And then Semenyo against West Ham at home, who at the moment is yellow flagged. Now, for what it's worth, I suspect Semenyo will be absolutely fine. And if he is, I'm definitely going to keep him because West Ham at home is a really good fixture. But I'll wait and see what Iraola says in his press conference on Friday. If he rules him out, I'm pretty confident I will just sell Semenyo. If he says it's touch and go, we'll have to wait and see, I may well just sell him anyway, if there's any doubts about him starting against West Ham at home. Because in game week 13, I'm probably going to free hit, so that week doesn't matter. And then for Bournemouth in game weeks 14, 15, 16, it's Everton at home, Chelsea at home, Man United away. Now, if you wanted to keep Semenyo for that, it's absolutely fine. He's still a good pick, but it doesn't scream essential. And also, his ownership is so high, there is maybe an opportunity to go against the crowd. So to clarify, if he's fine, I'm definitely keep him. No even thought about selling him. If he's out, I'm pretty sure I will sell. If there's doubts there, it's trickier, but I would lean towards maybe selling him if I can convince myself to do it. Because I just think 14, 15, 16, I can maybe take him on. And then in 17, when he's got Burnley at home, well, I've got 5 free transfers in game week 16. And my strategy basically is to make my moves over the next few weeks thinking long term still. I don't want to get to game week 16 and just blow 4 or 5 transfers. That's not going to be my strategy. At most, I want to use 2 in game week 16. And then ideally, I would use 1 at most and just keep rolling and rolling. And if it works out that my team is well set up for game week 16, I only need to use 1 or 2 moves. Maybe I bring Semenyo back for 17 against Burnley at home. Then maybe I sell him shortly afterwards. You know, if we get lucky with injuries and suspensions, there's going to be opportunities to make really short-term moves, which makes me less worried about holding him if he's a doubt or if he's ruled out for that West Ham game, especially when I've still got my free hit to use, which will probably be game week 13. And I'm not necessarily looking to be super aggressive with my moves before 16, but obviously I know by the time we get to 15, I've got to use all my transfers. So if Semenyo is out, there's less reason to look to hold on to him, I think. And by the way, every time I say you've got to use your transfers by 15, someone always says you don't actually have to use them. I get that, but I find it very difficult to believe that people in general will have such a good team that they can burn transfers. There's always going to be something to do. So that's why I'm kind of thinking that way, that by 15, all the transfers have got to be used. Therefore, if Semenyo's out this week, I will probably sell him. I'll come back onto replacements in just a second. Paquetá, red flagged, 5 yellow cards, only misses 1 game. Not a very good long-term pick. Eventually, I'm pretty sure I will sell into Minte. It's just about which week I do it. It won't necessarily be this week, but if it's not, it could be game week 14. And then Dewsbury Hall, I'm actually okay with him as a long-term pick. I picked him up for 5 million. He has dropped to 4.9, which is not great. But longer term, if you look at the Everton fixtures, he could be quite useful later on. Like Forest at home in 15, and then 18, Burnley away, Forest away, Brentford at home, Wolves at home. Leeds at home in 23. Like, he's just a pretty good long-term pick. And I know I'm saying, like, we've got transfers to use, but at that price, there's not really many other players that I can go for. Like, if I'm going to take a few punts, it's going to be on the slightly more expensive players, unless I can free funds up from somewhere else. But I just don't see that happening. So, Dewsbury Hall's mostly going to be on my bench, but I also think he's an okay pick. He's starting every single game. He's playing close to 90 in most of those games as well. He's on some set pieces. If he continues to play all games over Christmas, that's not a bad option to have. But also, it's worth saying, because I've got someone like Dewsbury Hall on my bench, and because I also have Guiu as well, it makes me a little bit less happy about going for Esteve in defence. Because that means I've got a really cheap bench then. Dewsbury Hall, Guiu and Esteve, it's not great. That's why I prefer to go at least for a 4.5 million defender, or potentially just stick to an Arsenal defender. On the Semenyo replacements, basically it's in Burma or Cunha, I think. I don't think I can bring myself to buy Foden because I know he's starting a lot right now, but we know that could change at any point. In Burma, if I go Esteve, otherwise I can just afford to go to Cunha with the money in the bank. I put this together, actually, some thoughts. This is kind of like longer term thoughts or over the next few weeks. Essentially, by game weeks 15 or 16, that GABRIEL spot will likely be another Arsenal defender. Even if I go to a 4.5 this week, by the time I get to 16, I'll want an Arsenal defender in to have the triple up for Wolves at home. Paquetá likely becomes Minte, and and then Semenyo potentially becomes Cunha. But obviously, if Semenyo's fine, I just keep hold of him for now. And Cunha is really just that I can't afford in Burmo. Basically, I much prefer in Burmo before AFCON, but I think Cunha's minutes will be quite good. Ideally, I'd like Semenyo to be fine this week so that I can put the Cunha move off for another couple of weeks and just see how Amorim sets up without Šeško. I'm confident in Cunha's minutes, but I'd also be more than happy to not have to make the decision this week. If Semenyo's fine for game week 12, then I can sell Gabriel or Paquetá and then bench the other one. So that goes back to what I was saying. I'm not necessarily looking to be super aggressive with my moves. If I can make one transfer and roll the other one, I'm more than happy to do that because stuff will happen that I need those transfers for later on. Or I can sell both and bench one of Anderson or Lacroix, basically. But I don't really need to go out of my way to do that. I'm leaning towards making one move and rolling for a rainy day. For what it's worth, by the way, just on transfers. So if I want to do Paquetá to Minte, I can afford to do Gabriel to anyone 6.6. So basically, that's every single defender I could possibly want, including Timber and Saliba. I could, and this is why Truffert and obviously Richards is on the list, I could do Gabriel to Truffert for 4.5, and then instead of Minte, go for an 8.1 million midfielder. That would allow me to get Cunha in, which is fine. And I could do that, but like I said, it leaves me with only 2 Arsenal, Raya and Saka, and I know longer term I'm going to want 3. But that is also a potential. If Gabriel, if I want to sell Gabriel and Paquetá, I could do that if Semenyo's fine. If Semenyo's out, and obviously Gabriel's out as well, I need to use 2 free transfers because I've got 3 problems. Again, this is where it gets slightly... There's so many different options I can do in this scenario, right? So let's say Semenyo's out. I could go for Mbermo. Let me just find him here. And then for Gabriel, I can afford anyone 5.9 or below. So I couldn't go for an Arsenal defender, but I could go for Munoz. That would be tempting. The problem is if I go for Munoz, he's 5.8 now. It only leaves me... Basically, I've got exact money to go to Minte, so I might price myself out of being able to move Paquetá on, which is not ideal. Or I can just do I can just get Cunha, basically. Cunha in for Semenyo, and then Gabriel to anyone 6.5. Or I can just do Semenyo and Paquetá out for Cunha and Minte, and then just leave Gabriel until game week 14 and just deal with it then. See how I feel about Timber versus Munoz versus Saliba in a couple of game weeks' time. Like I said, game week 13 doesn't matter because I'm probably going to free hit. Just quickly on the free hit, I have looked, basically it's 13 or 16 for me. And every time I run through plans of what I might want to do over the next few weeks, the team always looks better in 16 without the free hit than it does in 13. So I'm probably just going to go 13. Like I don't see any need to overthink it more than that. But yeah, that's the options, basically, if Semenyo's out. But otherwise, I can just make one move. I suspect if I only make one move, by the way, I'll probably do the Gabriel to the Arsenal defender and just bench Paquetá and play 5-3-2. But I could go either way. And then, yeah, if Semenyo and Gabriel are out, that's the different moves. Whoever doesn't get sold this week, likely just gets sold in 14, 15, 16. I think eventually Semenyo will go. It's just about when it happens. And yeah, if I downgrade Gabriel to a 4.5 defender, then want a third Arsenal by 16, it just requires an extra transfer. It's just all about how can I get to the team I'm going to want later on in the fewest amount of transfers possible. And I think basically that's Gabriel to an Arsenal defender. It's Paquetá to Minte, and then at some point it's Semenyo to Cunha, whether that's now or later on. And that's basically what I'm looking at in terms of transfers. Hopefully that was straightforward-ish to follow. Basically, we need to wait for news tomorrow, and I can make a final decision. But I'm not panicking because I've got 2 free moves, and things look pretty good. And because I've got basically lots of players that are absolutely nailed on, I'm never going to be pushed into a spot where I have to use, I'm never going to bring in a Doku who I then have to deal with later on, or a Gakpo, etc. I want players that are nailed so I can deal with these problems as and when they come up. Just really quickly, because I know this has been quite a long video, on the captain's armband, I probably am going to stick to Saka. Am I 100% confident that he's definitely better than Haaland this week? No, but I think it's worth it when Haaland has to play Newcastle away. I'm just hoping that Newcastle can keep that City score down and that Arsenal will do well against Spurs. And if Gyökeres is not back, It's not ideal for Arsenal, of course, but it does mean Saka would 100% be on penalties. So I think the armband's going to stick. I think as much as I'm seen as this template boring manager, I do like to try and look for opportunities where possible. I think this could be one. I think we might have another one in 14, maybe another one in 16 as well, just because of the away games that Haaland's got. And then up front, I've got Mateta and Haaland, and basically neither of those players is going anywhere unless they pick up an injury. Like, the only player I would even consider selling Haaland for is Salah. So I could get Salah this week, captain him, free hit Haaland back in for 13, because I'm likely to free hit 13 anyway, and then captain Salah in 14 as a differential, then buy Haaland back in 15. But in the process, that's 4 transfers. Bearing in mind I've got a Gabriel problem to deal with now as well, maybe a Semenyo one too. And I also lose team value on Haaland. And I know I'm definitely going to want him back because Salah will go to AFCON. So even if Salah does well over this stretch, you know he's a definite sell. So for that reason, I'd rather just captain Saka and keep hold of Haaland. And then Matesa's just great. Nailed on penalties, good fixtures, nothing to really worry about. The only forward I guess people have that I don't is Thiago. I'm not super worried about him. I know how well he's done. He is good value. But I'm free hit 13, so I can get him in for the Burnley game. And outside of that, in 12, 14, 15, he's got away games. So I'm not super concerned about him. Like, I think he's a good pick, but I'm not going to sit here worried that I don't have Thiago. You're never going to be able to have everyone, basically. I actually look at my team, and I'm not sure there's many players. Like, obviously, there's lots of players that I don't own, but I feel like I'm in a stage of FPL right now where I'm not massively worried about who everyone else has. In Burmo, maybe a little bit. I think he's pretty good. But who else is there? Thiago? You know, if I go Saliba, people will have Timber, but I'm still going to pick up the same clean sheets. I don't know. It doesn't feel like I'm missing like this highly owned player that's going to really damage me. That could be just Haaland captaincy this week, though, because I know everyone's going to go there. I'm probably going to go with Saka. So, as it stands, it's a wait and see for the press conferences tomorrow, but I'm pretty sure Gabriel to an Arsenal defender will be one move, and then it depends whether Semenyo is injured or not. If he is, I might get Cunha, and then eventually do Paquetá to Minte, or some combination this week. I won't go over it all again. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you tomorrow for final thoughts.